Abusia finally ended the official report on the August 8th helicopter crash notice out. Embassy said the infant said we are all now aware of what caused the unfortunate crash on August 6th.
Weather in the southern Ghana was poor on the day, which delayed departure for about an hour. In Accra, conditions were misty, with visibility of about 5 to 7 kilometers and very low clouds starting at only 700 to 1,100 feet above the ground. While the situation improved slightly later in the morning, the early hours were dominated by haze and overcast skies.
Now let's get into the details of the reports. And even before we move on, let me say that according to Endra reports, one of the key things they made mention of was the fact that the Zena helicopter that was used on August 6th, it wasn't the first time the same crew had used that same helicopter, because that was what most people were thinking. Say, hey, are the helicopter a new one? Pilots, captain, are they not too conversant with the plane? We should they their way around it and all of that. But that be and yes, and the reports now say the same people that used the helicopter on August 6th, they had used it multiple times that same month, that same August. The same crew used it on August 2nd. They used it on 3rd and 4th, and the only time they rested was, August 5th, because the following day, which was 6th, they had to embark on their ministerial duty. All these 8 people lost their lives.
The same crew had flown all the 3 flights before on the same helicopter. On the 2nd of August, they came from their base in Takrady to Accra. It was a Medivac flight, 1 hour long. On the 3rd of August, the following day, they did a flight from Accra to Cape Coast, back to Accra. 1 hour, 20 minutes. It was also a medical evacuation flight, Medivac. On the 4th, they were tasked to go fly Accra to Salman, back to Accra. That was a 2 hour 30 flight.
And even before the helicopter in Babetunu, they did all the checks they had to do. Was the helicopter in good shape? Was it serviced enough? The people on board, captain, pilot, are they certified enough to fly the helicopter? Do they have the qualifications? But still, what happened, happened.
Assessed the aircraft to see if it was fit for purpose. The helicopter entered the Ghana Air Force Service in May 2015, having been manufactured in 2012. And it reached its 10-year service threshold on 18th May 2025. Aircrafts have periodic checks to make sure that they're fit for service. The Air Force has 25-hour checks, 50-hour checks, and 100-hour checks. The 10-year check for the helicopter is what was mandated for this helicopter. Now, as is usual, an operator, in this case Ghana Air Force, requested from the manufacturer an extension. And it's normal, happens in civil flying, happens with any type of flying. The manufacturer gave a 90-day extension to 18th August 2025. And basically, the helicopter met all the basic safety requirements. That notwithstanding, it sort of clashed, it sort of met a 100-hour check. So the Air Force also did a 100-hour check on the helicopter before the flight. The aircraft on the day was declared serviceable and duly signed off by both the engineers and the captain.
Now, every report about Bontino, Utie reports from time almost time one of the major things they attributed a helicopter crash to was the weather. Utie one to weather, unfavorable weather condition in this area, the cloud, thunderstorm, Niniema baby weather needed to NHS helicopter crash according to reports, initial time was a helicopter almost set off was 8 a.m. And per their calculations, no omache we was 15 minutes because 8 any of destination, no calculations in the they should have arrived at their destination by 15 minutes time. But then the captain at that time, that was a squadron leader Peter Nala, or sure whether not the weather wasn't looking that favorable, and he had to intentionally delay the flight to 9 a.m. So the flight that was to take off at 8, and because of the weather, no, almost set it off at 9 a.m.
On Wednesday, 6th August, the crew for the Z9 aircraft, call sign IceCap, Hotel Romeo, India, planned to execute the task order for the Ministry of Defense. The flight was scheduled to depart at 8 a.m. with an estimated en route time of 50 minutes. The captain delayed the flight due to adverse weather in Accra, Kumasi, and Obuasi. The weather improved about an hour later. So, takeoff ended up at 12 minutes, 14 seconds after 9 a.m. Throughout the flight, the altitude changed to avoid low clouds.
Now, aside the weather I made mention of, they also, attributed the plane crash to several things. And one of the things they also said was that the helicopter lacked some support, it lacked some equipment, some instruments, and then was say, and what helicopter and one thing that they said was that the captain and the pilots, they were using visual reference. And what that means is that time Omuchi helicopter, there was no support. Any proper instruments be a bed director so ebia a hand say dodgy cloud say dabi visual reference no they were using their eye window ni ebia hand say there was no other alternative support in say omuchi car share dashboard, share real mirror, and no some share quietness to say ebia I'm in my lane. Can be I'm crossing me, and that was what was happening up there.
If you're flying under visual flight rules, what it means is you're using visual references to navigate. It's a normal way of flying. So they were using visual cues to navigate to go to Obuasi. And so they had to stay away from cloud, in contact with the ground.
Now, another thing they made mention of, say, and a problem Kessia Wapan was the fact that there was no formal information on the weather made available to the pilot and captain at that time. And I asked myself, why was this so? Because a airplane, helicopter, 3D, anywhere than a num. So why would we allow all these people on board without giving them the weather forecast of the day or even the day before Kwano? Why did we not tell them how the weather up there was like? Send a Bayer Krana, they would have predicted what would have happened because, come to think of it, we in yellow so this is the sky. Omane weather forecast. This area there is going to be this, there is going to be fog, thunderstorm, Dabi. We just left them like that, and I asked myself, airline, what were you people doing? Meteorological office, air traffic control, what was going on? Why was no report on the weather? Because Mama reports Nichim said the weather was the major thing that caused the crash. Now ye jump just like that without any reports. At the internet
there was no formal information on the weather available to the pilots along the flight route. Witnesses reported poor visibility due to fog and rain at Brofuyedru and its environs.
Now, after their whole investigation and assessment, they've also come out with some recommendations. Some chairs, maybe henceforth, even before a plane would take off, say it has some equipment, say it has some support. But one thing they made mention of was the terrain awareness system. And no, and a bebboy Michelle, where you can say it was a plane or a helicopter, maybe it would direct them for hand say, ye say near the day, amidst other things, almost to say if all these things were made available on August 6th, Nanka crash, we wouldn't have even heard or seen anything like helicopter crash.
The helicopter was airworthy, but it lacked additional safety enhancements. For instance, the terrain awareness warning system. Now, the terrain awareness warning system, for instance, is predictive. So what it does is it tells you, warns you, it gives you a better picture of the situation and puts the pilots in it gives them, puts them in a position to make better judgments, to be able to see everything and be able to foretell if there are any things that could possibly create a problem.
Now, our recommendations, they gave a big kudos to the emergency response or team at the time of a helicopter crashing, because per report, at the time of the crash, the weather at the place that crashed, it taking place, was not even that favorable. But still, that emergency response team, Boamah in 2 hours time, looking at the condition of the place and the weather at that time, Boamah in 2 hours time. Ama the investigative team and the report nearby to go and assess the area in that 2 hours time. So a big kudos to that emergency response team at that time.
The investigation would like to say that from everything they gathered, the emergency response was very timely. The fact that the first responders managed to get to the site in about 2 hours was remarkable, because the terrain has very steep slopes. It was raining. It was slippery. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do. When we went to the site, it was also raining and it was very slippery. And we struggled using sticks and everything to try to get up there. So looking at everything, we would say very confidently that the emergency response was very timely.
Enti abusia na endra eno no eninti no se na medi kan yesi weather no na chese cause helicopter crash and miss other 1 or 2 things. So we are just hoping that henceforth before say we machine bia betu no all the needed checks, because we are not ready to lose another set of people. No, that is not going to be the portion of Ghana. And this is where I come to the end of today's video. Thank you so much for staying tuned with me. I will see you all in my next video.